When you pursue a meaningful life, it's so interesting sometimes the people you'll run into. You don't really plan on meeting these people, but the people who come into our lives can really be game changers for us. It's very interesting to think back on. This week I've met two people seemingly, I would say coincidentally or randomly, but I really don't think it was coincidence. I really don't believe in coincidence at this point in life. And it was very interesting. The first one I met was on a flight to Atlanta, Georgia. I did a TV show this past weekend in Atlanta, and so I was flying to Atlanta and flying back. And of all these, there's like 35 rows on an airplane, and I end up sitting right next to a guy. I'm in the window seat on row like 21 or 22, and he's right next to me in the aisle seat. He just so happens to be a fellow Army combat veteran like me. He did 6 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. And I was just going to put my earbuds in and talk, or not talk, to just put my earbuds in and listen to my music or, an audiobook. And 2.5 hours later, about that, we end up landing in Atlanta, and he and I are still talking. And we had an incredible conversation. It just so happens I was carrying with me a copy of my book, Redeployed, which is about how combat veterans can fight the battle within and win the war at home. And he and I had talked about some struggles we had both shared, and things we'd overcome, things that worked for us. Incredible. You'd have thought that we knew each other for years. And it was just so cool to just randomly sit next to somebody like that. And I was thinking about switching my seat before I got on the airplane, just trying maybe to get a closer seat to the front. And I decided not to, and I just said, whatever, it's a window seat, I'm fine. And afterwards, I was so glad I didn't, because I ended up sitting next to this guy. And so you just never know who you're going to sit next to. We've emailed since, back and forth. He's really enjoying the book. It's helping him out. And that is just the coolest thing in the world. And then last Sunday, my wife and I were sitting we actually got to church kind of late. We ended up sitting in the back row. And there's a guy who came and sat right next to me. And there were a few seats down. I think there was 1 or 2 available. Well, he sat in one right next to me. So, somebody sits kind of close to you, but whatever. And so we're sitting there the whole time. And afterwards, as we get up to leave, I introduced myself. I said, hi, how are you? And we started talking. I introduced him to my wife, Jamie, and he introduced himself and told us a little bit about his story and how he had moved here from Colorado and some stuff about him. Well, we talked for 3 or 4 minutes and said hello, and then we left. I figured I'd never see this guy again. I'm riding my motorcycle down in Frisco, Texas earlier this evening while it was still daylight, and I run into this same guy from 5 or 6 days ago, from last weekend. And so we reconnect. He didn't recognize me with my helmet and my sunglasses on because I was riding my motorcycle, but I recognized him, and I took my glasses off and I looked at him and I pointed to him, and he came over and we talked. We talked for probably 30 minutes right there as I got off my bike and shook his hand and just kind of sat there, took my helmet off, and we just had a conversation about life. And I learned about his story and about how he overcame a heroin addiction and some other drug addictions. He completely got off the stuff. The guy has such an incredible story. And you think to yourself, if I wouldn't have sat in that exact seat in the back of that church, if I hadn't gotten there late and didn't get a seat, and I wouldn't have sat right there in that chair, I never would have said hi to the guy because I wouldn't have had the chance. And we never would have ended up talking this evening either. Or I look back on that airplane flight, if I would have switched my seat, or if my seat assignment would have been different, I wouldn't have sat next to that same guy. And it's just so interesting because we get blessed by the people we meet. Some people out there think that other people are blessed to meet them. And, those aren't those are unhealthy egos. But you never know when you're living your life on purpose and for a meaning, and you're pursuing meaning in your experiences and what you're doing, and you believe you're doing what you're called to do. It's just incredible the people who will just randomly, seemingly come into your life, and it just turns into something amazing. It's a memory that makes life worth living. So I don't know if you've ever had that experience or not, but I wanted to share that with you, and I wanted to encourage you to keep going after what you're going after. Whatever you feel called to, whatever you feel God's telling you to do with your life, go after that thing, pursue that thing. And it's interesting because the most amazing people will end up coming into your life when you least expect it. It's the coolest thing in the world.